Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Stefanie Marrone, joined by Chris Fritsch. Welcome to our first webinar of 2023. Happy New Year. And this webinar is all about how to use marketing technology in 2023 and beyond. We're going to delve into some trends and tips and lots of really fun things. This is actually going to be a series. So we'll email everybody with a date for the next one. Chris and I presented a lot of webinars in 2022. You can catch them on our YouTube channels or message us, and we're happy to send them to you. We hope you're connected to us on social media. You can find us pretty much on every channel and on our email list. I will put a link to those in the chat as well. It's in there, but if you didn't see it, I'll post it again. So Chris, why don't you introduce yourself for those who don't know you, which is like impossible because everyone knows you.
Lord. I'm Chris Fritsch. I am actually a CRM success consultant, and I always say that is not an oxymoron. In the last 15 plus years, we've probably helped 200 or more firms successfully select and implement CRM systems and related and integrated technology, marketing technology. And then we have a large team that does data quality work, data stewarding, manual data stewarding, outsourced. And we also have a data quality professional team that does some automated data stewarding and data cleanup work as well. And we work with a lot of different CRM systems on things like training, communication, planning, things like that.
Yes, and I know this very well because I've actually hired Chris many times in my law firm life, including now as a outsourced CMO. And so let me go this way. This is me. I'm Stefanie Marrone. I've been in the legal marketing industry for 20 plus years. Was not actually what I set out to do. I was a journalist and then got somehow courted into law firms, and here I am, 20 plus.
Stefanie, I don't think I knew that. I was a journalist as well.
Look at that. I was a magazine editor at Redbook magazine. I don't know if you
learn something new every day.
And I wrote the horoscopes, which means I made them up, Chris. Just
I remember
fun fact
that.
about me. All right. It's going to be a lucky year for you, Chris, and for Janine. Lucky year for you and Richard. All right. So the rest of you are going to come into money. That's your horoscope. Free gift with purchase today, guys. And it's a free purchase. All right. Now I was in-house for many years at all of the firms at the bottom. I am in-house sort of now too, because I'm CMO at a number of small and mid-sized firms. I only work with small and mid-sized firms now. And I also work with a bunch of legal service providers as well, content marketing, social media, and just general marketing. So that's me. And I have 2 French bulldogs and one snores really loudly and you'll hear her in the background. Okay. So, Chris, you gave this great title. I'm going to be your Vanna White for that, which is, by the way, so weird. She's not aging. Anyone else agree with me on that? I'm going to turn your slides for you. So let's delve into it.
Sounds great. Well, so what we said we were going to do today was, this is a little bit of a series and a masterclass on, top tips and trends for this year. We're in January. It makes sense to always start out with some trends. I work with a lot of law firms, and so I wanted to share some of the things that our team is seeing in the market, so that everybody can kind of be aware of these and maybe plan for them. We're all thinking, are we going to have a recession? It goes back and forth every day, depending on who you talk to. But there are definitely some trends that I have seen that I think are going to continue. Things like digital first, because we're not fully back to in person. I think it was great. We had a lot of conferences last year, probably way too many in a very short period of time. I was a little worn out by the travel, but it was great to be back in person, but we're still not fully digital. So I think we're not fully in person. So I think we all know that we're going to need to keep some digital. And I think, we all saw webinars work. I mean, look at this webinar. How many of our fabulous friends are on here? 112 people. So, we all are sort of having to balance the in-person business development and marketing and the digital. I've never seen so many firms focused on CRM, so many firms changing their CRM system, and a lot of them getting a focus on an ERM tool built into their CRM, because it's incredibly important to minimize the attorney effort. And how do I compete with that, Stephanie? Really? With the dog? I can't. I'm overshadowed completely.
This is Lucy, the one who snores. If I hold her, she snores less. I mean, you had a cat on your lap, so.
I did. He's gone. So also, I've got some ideas that I'm going to share, some tips around things like, how are we going to define success? I think this year we're going to have some new ways. I'll give you some new ideas for how to define success with these tools. We're seeing a proliferation of marketing technology managers because the budgets in the marketing technology department are actually increasing such that sometime soon they're going to actually exceed the IT budgets is the prediction, and they have in outside of legal. We're also seeing a lot more outsourcing. It's probably the biggest trend that we personally are seeing because we have a team that does sort of outsourced CRM management and data stewarding, and firms are really taking advantage of that. Outside of legal, mobile first. Mobile is the platform, and it's continued to increase. Not as much. If you do check your web traffic, you'll see, in law firms, we do tend to have more desktop and laptop traffic, but outside, mobile it just dominates. I'm going to talk a little bit. This is the first part in the series. We're going to do another series about some of the advanced things that are coming around, like BD tools, pipelines, things like that. That's one of the reasons so many people are changing CRM systems, is to take advantage of these advanced BD tools and to get to the cloud. But we'll talk more about that in our second session. Stephanie's going to talk a little bit about AI and content marketing, and also the engagement with alumni and how that should be top of a lot of people's list for this year. All right, let's do the next.
All right.
Steph, you want to take this one?
I'm actually going to get into this later on, but just know that AI is here. And if you're not using it yet, you will be. I'm going to show you a crazy example. Actually, this entire presentation was created by a robot. No, just kidding. And we're actually robots. I'm going to get into this later on. You'll see in my slides, but it's really interesting. If you don't know about Chat GPT, you will. And Canva, actually, you guys, for those of you who have it, has now a tool that has AI built into it. And so content marketing, which I'm going to get into in a bit, is now integrated with AI, aspects of AI. You can't just depend on it, because there's lots of issues, but it can help you as a starting point with some things. And so there are there's questions about it, but I want to talk about how you can use as a law firm some of these tools.
Great. So let's start with, in this session, we're going to focus on some of the core tech and MarTech tools that we have now. And then in our next session, we're going to focus on some of the more advanced tools of the future. So right now we're going to start with, CRM and ERM and websites and email marketing, things that we're all really familiar with. We've been doing well for a long time, but how do we do better with those? Steph?
Oh, sorry.
All right, Vanna, come on.
Sorry, Vanna's getting fired.
Yeah, okay. The beauty of CRM is it can do 1,000 things. I always say this. The problem with CRM is it can do 1,000 things, and it should probably do 3. It shouldn't be this giant Swiss Army knife that you see here. You go to the next slide. So these are, a lot of the things that you can do with CRM, and some of these we've been doing for a long time. Content management, lists and events, getting lists into the e-marketing tool. There's a lot of stuff, a basic who knows who, but there are some new things that we can do as well. What we're seeing now is more use of things like pipelines. Some systems have really advanced BD tools like pipelines. And while we're still pretty far behind most of the corporations and even the accounting firms, who obviously they care a lot about numbers, I'm finally starting to see firms that want pipelines. I think we're a long way from firms actively using them, but we'll talk more about that in our second session. But, we're going to give you these slides. I don't want to read all this, so feel free to take this, and maybe you've got some things here that you're not doing that you could be doing. So just some ideas here. Take a look.
And this is one of those things, Chris, from the smaller firm perspective and mid-sized firm perspective, it's like analysis paralysis. It's like you can do all of these things, but you can't. And so like prioritizing the things that are really important to the bottom line, to the business, to the future is so important. And I think like that's also one of the things that we struggle with, especially because we have less people and less money, less resources to do all of these things. So
yeah, that's a great point. So CRM, it's great that we can do all these things, but we can't really focus on everything, like you said. But the nice thing is, the way to do this, I had a really smart firm, somebody at a very smart contact at a firm tell me, what we need to do is figure out, you need to sit down and focus on pilot groups. So if you've got a new system you're rolling out, or you're trying to get better adoption of your existing system or more value, start with a pilot. And I think we all knew to start with a pilot, but you sit down with that pilot and you really get to assess their needs. What's the problem they need to solve? Or, they need to be more efficient. They're doing webinars, whatever it might be, and wrap CRM around that one thing, maybe two things. Sit down with another group, pilot two, and do the same thing. And then do another pilot and another until you run out of pilots, because it makes everybody sort of feel like a special snowflake, right? Your CRM is specifically for them, and they're all doing different things. And at the end of the day, or the end of the year, you may find out you're doing a lot of these things, but everyone's using it differently, and that's okay, because they're all getting value. And that's what you want. That's when they actually say that they're getting more than just a glorified Rolodex.
mm-hmm.
The next slide. The really important key piece, I think, is ERM, or Enterprise Relationship Management. And that is a tool to capture the contacts from the signature blocks of emails and create who knows who relationships, along with relationship strength based on the recency and frequency of communication. It minimizes the attorney effort. It's not an Outlook sync. So for 20 plus years, we thought we had to have an Outlook sync, and it made sense, right? In corporations, we're not like a corporation where you start your new job, they hand you the keys, and you have the CRM, and there's your contacts. No, the contacts come in with the new lawyer who joins the firm, and they're typically in a PST file or in their Outlook, and you've got to get them in. Makes sense, but there's also a lot of problems with that. People put stuff into Outlook and they never take it out, they never update it, so it becomes garbage. They create multiple records. People know the same people. When you bring those records over, you create thousands of duplicates that take a lot of time to clean up. And there's always the dead person, the retired person in there. And it made sense for a long time, but now people don't use Outlook like they used to. The more I talk to people, they're like, yeah, you're right, I don't really use it anymore. And if they do, it's just this warehouse of bad data, which we'll talk about in our second session. So the ERM instead is going to capture those from a signature block of an email on the Exchange folder, and the attorney does nothing. No training, no implementation, no installation, nothing. And so they're not going to do data entry. They have less patience now for data entry and training than I've ever seen. So these new tools are absolutely essential. In the old CRM, who knows who, based on that person was in Outlook and I shared that person, so I must know them. You go to that person and ask them, they're like, I have no idea who you're talking about. Or it might be somebody they met years ago, or they were up against in court, whatever. You don't really know who knows who well. These tools really help with that. Next slide.
Okay.
And of course, our old standard email marketing, which of course is the key to digital first. We've got to do a good job at this. My big thing is integration with CRM should be a top consideration. That's why these systems like Future and Concept have become really embedded, because they do integrate with a lot of different CRM systems that are built for law firms. And they're totally integrated. They've already done the work. Don't have to do any custom integrations. I've also seen a trend of some firms considering other non-legal vertical specific e-marketing systems like Marketo, Eloqua, Pardot, HubSpot. Some of them work with very specific systems, and these are really big tools. They're really designed for things like marketing automation, which if you're interested in that, stay tuned for part 2, because we're going to talk a lot about marketing automation and a lot more about these tools. The thing to understand, though, is they don't necessarily integrate with all the legal CRM systems, or any of the legal. Some of them don't integrate with any of the systems. So you basically got 2 CRMs, or 2 disconnected silos of data, which is another big pain point. And we'll talk more about that in session 2.
this is one of my biggest pain points for my clients and being in-house, like seeing both sides, Chris. Like email marketing to me is the most important way to communicate with your clients, particularly if you're producing high value content, meaning client alerts and blog posts and all those things. Like you need to do email marketing, number one, right? Your lists need to be good. We'll talk all about, data quality management, all that stuff. But so many firms are using like Constant Contact and MailChimp, and the systems aren't talking. You're uploading lists or you're relying on old lists that are living in those systems. And particularly for small and mid-sized firms, I mean, you cannot, number one, you need a CRM. Number two, you have to have an integrated email marketing tool with your CRM. And otherwise you're just like spinning wheels trying to figure out like, well, did they open up our email? Like, it's just, you're not really benefiting from these things that you're doing. And you could be so much more sophisticated about it. Right. So
yeah, I agree. It's a big pain point, especially for smaller firms, because, for a long time, the legal focused, vertical software for legal, they understood law firms and they built these great systems, but the software was very expensive. Now with subscriptions, it's more affordable, but the implementations are still very expensive and they're out of the budget of many smaller firms, say under 100, under 75 attorneys. And, folks would come to us and ask, hey, can you help me find a system? And I didn't really have a lot of options for them. And so we're actually, it's funny, we're actually coming out with a piece of software for smaller firms in a few months that'll actually help do that. So stay tuned. We'll let you know when that happens.
cool.
Let's do the next slide.
Mhm.
So, you've got all this technology, you've got, all the things that we've talked about so far, and yet Gartner every year for decades has been telling us 70+% of CRM implementations and other technology implementations fail to meet expectations. Right? I would venture a guess it's closer to 90+% in legal. But I will say, if it's not meeting your expectations, here's a tip: your expectations may be wrong. It may not be the software. And so we're going to talk about
maybe you need to lower your expectations.
Not necessarily. You don't necessarily need to lower your expectations. You need to sort of level set your expectations. And we're going to talk about some tips for how to do that and how to keep the same technology and change your thinking to get more value out of these pieces of software. And a lot of this is people process. So some of the reasons: lack of buy-in. People at the top have not bought in. There hasn't been a champion at the top. You didn't have leadership support maybe, so down the ranks nobody uses it. Lack of adoption, and we're going to talk about how to fix that problem and redefine that problem. A lot of lack of resources, time, money, and people. I had a client say to me, we were doing a CRM success assessment where we come up and work together with a firm to figure out what their needs are before they select the software. I know it's a radical concept. And we were talking about what was required. And when we meet with the attorneys, we tell them the good and the bad. This is what you need to do to succeed with this. So you've got the right expectations. And we were talking about, you have to have a data steward. And we had this whole conversation, and the managing partner says, I'm sorry, what do you mean we have to have a data steward? Nobody told us this. Why didn't the software vendor tell us we needed a data steward? I said, I don't know, it's probably not a great way to sell software, but you do, because if the attorneys, I can tell you as an attorney, if the data is bad, the system is bad, and I'm not using it. So you've got to keep up with the data. And we're going to talk a lot more about that in part 2. The level at which now data is going bad. It used to be 30% a year, but now with work from home and the Great Resignation, people changing jobs and global nomads, it's a lot higher than that. So half your data could be going bad every year. You got to keep up with that.
Yeah, don't mail holiday cards to people. FYI, if you're mailing cards, like, nope, abort mission. Okay.
Well, and think about this too, Stephanie. A lot of people, when the pandemic happened and continuing, they were doing all these let's cook from home, wine tasting from home, cocktail, bartending at home type classes, and you had to mail stuff out to people. You had to deliver things to them. Mm-hmm. We weren't keeping home addresses for the longest time. So now we have to think about, should we have home addresses in our CRM, and how in the world do we keep up with that? So, all right. Absolutely. So adoption is probably the biggest pain point that I hear when people say, my CRM does not meet expectations. It's a failure. It's a Rolodex. It's a glorified mailing list. We have defined adoption as close to 100% as possible of attorneys are using the software. Typically people will say using means going in there, adding contacts, updating contacts, checking on lists, adding people and removing people, regularly reviewing lists, adding activities. How many times has that happened? Never going to happen. I was working with a large firm the other day, and we were looking at, it's like, oh, we were so excited. There were some BD activities in there. And they said, yeah, but I think you're going to find they're probably 5 years old. We did a push 5 years ago to see if people would add activities. And we sat down with one pilot group and we worked with them. And you're probably not going to find anything after that. It sort of fizzled out over a period of time. Lo and behold, the last activity, they were from 5 years ago or 6 years ago. So the only way activities get done is usually if you usually can't rely on the attorneys to enter the activities. You might get a couple. But if you do want to do activity tracking, you have to be very thoughtful and intentional in how you do it. And you have to give support to the attorneys. And we're going to talk a little bit about that too. But let's think about this. Really, you're billing, some of these firms over $1,000 an hour. Probably data entry is not the highest and best use of attorney time. Just saying. So let's think about, instead of putting data in, let's have attorneys get value out. Let's define adoption like that. If we've done pilot groups, and this is so sort of counter to what you would think, the goal would be 100% using it. Let's go to all the offices and train everybody, and we do everything a consistent way. You got to rethink that. You got to be slow and intentional with individual pilot groups and individual attention and individual training, finding out what their pain points are, wrapping CRM around those pain points, maybe picking 1 or 2 or 3 of those things and working with that group on that thing, and then do the next group. And it's time consuming, but CRM never ends. So that's, got a long time to get it done.
Yeah. I mean, you can't boil the ocean, right? So,
Exactly. Want to do the next slide?
Yeah, that is, yeah.
So I touched a little on this a second ago. Let lawyers be lawyers. Let them do the things they want. They want to do legal work. They should be working with the clients, providing client service. They should be, doing their business development and, really focusing on those things. That's the best use of their time, their highly, highly expensive time. So anything we can do to help would be great. So one of the firms I worked with in the Pacific Northwest had said, we are a white glove service firm. We have people in-house to do the things that the attorneys need done to free them up to take care of the clients. And I thought about this and I went, we are a white glove industry. I mean, really, if you think about it, we really are. And so let's embrace it. There's nothing wrong with that. It's actually great. We want them to provide white glove service to their clients. Why shouldn't we provide white glove service, in the marketing and BD teams to our clients, the lawyers? So anything we can do to get them information. A lot of the new systems are really serving up information, when the attorneys need it. Let's figure out what reports do they need. Forget out of the box reports until you sit down with a group and figure out what they need and figure out what's the dashboard. Is it a dashboard they need? Is it a report delivered in email every Monday? What is it? And then have some really smart folks on the back end who can configure those reports and those dashboards and really understand. The key is, for many firms, is a smart marketing technology coordinator, manager, even director, depending on the size, who can translate attorney requirements and needs into business requirements and sort of wrap the CRM around those and help solve these problems. Mm-hmm. And again, take the attorneys out of the picture, use that ERM system, provide them with the info that they need, and then also consider enhancing your data. So there are a lot of systems now that have data feeds from D&B, from, a lot of different places that can bring in business and industry and other types of information, revenue and size of organization, and time and billing integrations, things like that, so that you can finally pull a client list. Sounds so easy. Why can't we pull a client list? My God, we paid all this money. We have all these people. We can't pull a client list. Well, nobody's ever tagged the clients. It sounds like it's easy, but it's not. It requires an integration. We want industries. Somebody's got to put them in. It's either got to be done manually or through one of these data feeds. The data feeds are great. They just get better. But a couple things, understand they are expensive. They are ongoing subscriptions. There's a lot of cleanup work up front to match up the records. And the data is never going to be 100%. When we do data stewarding and data cleanup work, we have some firms that have 1 million records that have to be cleaned. So you can't do it 100% manually. You start with an automated process, but it's only going to get you at best 70% there. The rest of it has to be done, with humans. It has to be checked. Same thing with this data. I don't necessarily recommend exposing it to the attorneys. Just use it in the marketing team. Hey, because, in a law firm, right, the perfect is always the enemy of the good, right? If anything is wrong, the system is bad. But if you can actually pull a list of industry group clients, our energy clients for our energy seminar, at least you have a starting point. That's more than you had before. Before you had nothing. And now, even if it's 70%, that's a pretty big improvement, but you have to keep it in perspective. Next slide. The other thing is, I say this over and over, technology needs to provide value. So this is the biggest tip. Solve problems, automate processes, improve efficiency, enable business development to enhance firm revenue. And CRM is really about communication, coordination, and client service. All of these different tools working together can really help deliver this for your clients and for your attorneys. Next slide. A couple of things, Stephanie said this earlier, don't try to boil the ocean. So sit down and create a plan. You need to, before you buy the technology, do a needs assessment. Sit down, with all the key stakeholders. When we do a CRM success assessment, we have 12 plus hours of meetings, depending on the size of the firm, with the key stakeholders across the firm. We spend a lot of time with marketing and a lot of time with BD, but also with IT, with the key lawyer stakeholders, with leadership, with the sometimes with the, if they're going to do integrations with the accounting and finance and HR and training teams. Everybody defines success differently, and you need to make sure that they're all involved initially. Sometimes we even involve the assistants if they're going to be involved, because you want to get people involved early and often and feel like they're part of this process. That's a really important part of it. And then sit down during that process, figure out, where are your opportunities to succeed and how are we going to measure them? Because we really believe this can and should be measured, not all of it, but a lot of it. Define your goals, get consensus on the goals, achieve the goals, communicate successes, and repeat. And don't do it alone. Stephanie or I will always take a phone call. Your providers and vendors will take phone calls. Your network and peers and all the folks at LMA. We have such a great network here. And in most firms, not everybody has rolled out a CRM or any marketing tool before, and they're expensive and you don't often get a second chance sometimes, unfortunately. So reach out for help. Again, we've got a great group of folks here who are always happy to lend a hand and let you learn from what they did right and maybe what they didn't do so right. We've also got a ton of free resources on our site at clientsfirstconsulting.com. We're going to give you these slides. So these hyperlinks are live. Our resource toolbox has presentations, articles, white papers, best practices, checklists, got reference checking questions, assessment questions, all sorts of good stuff. And we've also got a CRM success tips e-newsletter. If you click that link, you can also access that, and we send out a tip every try to do it every week. So lots of good stuff. And there's all these resources are on our blog as well, the CRM success blog. So the stuff that goes out in the e-newsletter starts on the blog. So it's always there if you need it in real time.
And the link is in the chat for that, and we'll send around another link. Plus, there were some questions that people had about getting a copy of the recording. Yes, everybody who is here and also registered will also get a copy of today's recording. So no worries about that. Chris, awesome. Thank you so much. I actually have a few questions for you that I'll ask during the Q&A, because I don't know about you guys, and I'm curious to put it in the chat, but I'm still seeing people, just not where they should be when it comes to just managing CRM at the level I feel like it should be at, and using email marketing maybe also at that level. So, oh, you have a final tip.
Always do, right?
Yeah.
Invest in technology. I mean, that's okay. I'm the technology consultant. That's always going to be my last say. But it really is important, and it really is changing things. And you're going to talk more about that.
Yeah, don't let things become a crisis. I mean, I think I said this recently. I was working with an IP firm that was in the midst of getting a new big client. It was going to be like a big AI tech company, and they looked at their website of this firm, and they were like, "Are you guys going out of business?" And on their page for what they do in AI and tech and for telecom, they had a picture of a BlackBerry. They hadn't invested in their website in 10 years. And they needed new pictures, new website. It wasn't mobile friendly. It wasn't responsive. And it's not like you can snap your fingers when you're in the midst of a pitch to get a new website. I mean, it takes 6 months to get a new website. And so, they weren't investing in themselves. So this isn't one of my slides, but I'll tell everybody, this, hopefully, but invest in your website. Don't let your website become a crisis situation, because your website is your showcase piece. It is where people go to find out information about you. Okay. So let's dive into a few things. So I am not going to spend today talking about LinkedIn at all, except just
I don't believe it for a minute.
No, this is all I'm going to say, because I do separate trainings on LinkedIn. You can look them up, follow me on LinkedIn, go to my YouTube, free everything. Okay. What I will say on about LinkedIn is that if you're not on LinkedIn in 2023, you are at a huge disadvantage, particularly because decision makers of today and tomorrow were born with a smartphone in the crib. Okay, in utero, actually, I would say. They know how to look up. My niece is 3. She knows how to look up everything on my phone. Okay. Amazing. Different generation than me and you, Chris. So if you're not utilizing LinkedIn as an organization and as a person, and then to this point on this slide, helping your employees use social media to promote themselves, and by extension, your firm, you will be left behind. Okay. Any firm that blocks their employees or discourages them from using LinkedIn is also at a huge disadvantage, because your employees are either your strongest brand ambassadors or not. Okay. So invest in training for your employees to utilize LinkedIn, because you want to tap into their valuable networks, because, by the way, most of their connections are not following your firm. And even if they are, the LinkedIn algorithm doesn't necessarily enable them to see any of the content that your firm is posting. Okay. The other thing I'll say, nobody cares about dry firm content on LinkedIn, meaning the firm has once again won super lawyers and all that stuff. You've got to find a way to inject personality, inject human to human is what I'm calling it. And I'll get into that in a minute. And yes, there are ways for law firms to even do that. Okay. So invest in training, invest in your employees' personal brands, and make sure everybody knows how to use LinkedIn. Short form video. Okay. So let me give you an example of short form video. Today, this is a 1-hour presentation. I'm going to take this 1-hour presentation and I'm going to splice it up into probably 15 social media clips. I will give Chris a bunch for her marketing team to use. I will use them for myself. Now, I'm not a video editor. When we need something really fancy done, we'll call up Rob Cates, who many of you know. He can do it, right? He's awesome. You can also have a Mac. You can do a lot of stuff on iMovie. I just bought myself a Mac actually, so I can learn how to do this. My little trick, it's so low budget, you're gonna die, you guys. It's Alexis Robertson from Foley and Lardner taught me this. I go to the video on my phone, which I post on YouTube. I do the screen recording. I grab the snippet I want, and then I just cut my screen a little bit. I just like maneuver it. Has anyone ever done that? I don't know if you guys know about this tip, but that's how I edit my videos, okay? Short form video is so important. Nobody wants to watch this 1 hour recording, even though we're going to send it to you, but better, wouldn't you rather have a snippet about CRM, a snippet about video, a snippet about email marketing? Long videos, unless you're getting CLE credit, which none of us care about really, they're not as engaging, okay? Short form video, by the way, is less than, I would say 3 minutes. The videos that do the best and what I've seen are between 1 and 3 minutes. What are some ideas for law firm videos? Get your lawyers to talk about an upcoming webinar, what people are going to learn. They're going to a conference. What are they going to be talking about? A client alert. Distill 5 key points, okay? They're efficient. They're engaging. You can get right to the point. Some lawyers, by the way, are not good for video. Don't put them on video. They can do a podcast. They can do nothing. They can write client alerts, okay? Not everyone is made for camera. It's just the truth, right? You can turn tons of content into video. You probably don't even realize it. And one of the other things is my big tip is repurpose, repurpose, repurpose. Today's webinar is actually going to be a blog post from us, several, and a long form article. And you know how I do it? I download this from Zoom into Otter. How many of you use Otter or know about Otter? It's the best transcription tool that I've used, and it doesn't cost really anything. So these are tools you guys need to know about, particularly if you're figuring out what to do with a webinar. There are so many things you can do to take your webinar and repurpose it. Okay, so short form video, you already have it. Look for your evergreen webinars from the past. Okay, okay. SEO, strategic SEO has to be part of your content marketing strategy. A lot of what I'm talking about today, because we're talking about trends, it's really based on content. So I don't want anyone to like call up a company and try to get like a search engine optimization expert, because I really don't believe in that. I believe in writing good content and then everything else will follow. The way to do it is writing very strategically, putting in strategic keywords, and that really helps you. It's also writing more content. It's having a blog. It's having lots of client alerts, and it's the posts that have the lists. So 5 things to think about when you're filing for bankruptcy, okay? Coming up with these evergreen pieces really will help a law firm. You've got to think about your click-through rates and engagement metrics. If you're not looking at these statistics, you're not being smart about it. And then you've got to think about backlinks, and you've got to think about how many other things can you link to on your site as well to keep people on the page. That's dwell time, okay? SEO has to be part of your content strategy.
Well, it's so funny too, because I've worked with 2 or 3 different companies on SEO over the years. And when you hire them, there's an initial thing I think that is valuable, in that they will go through your site and figure out, do you have things that are broken? Do you have tags that are wrong? Are your titles consistent? Or if they're over a certain length, it can, take a hit. And you should only have to do that probably once every few years. But then past that, the next thing they say is write more content, write more. I mean, that's like what they say as well. I think there is an element of tweaking though. This is like, I mean, we've learned so much about it. It is a full-time job figuring out what's going to work and going to Google and looking at, what are the keywords you want? Well, which ones are related to those? And you've got to make sure you don't say that word too many times on the page, but you've got to say it enough. And like you said, the lists do really well. Google right now, the algorithm changes every twice, 2 or 3 or more times a year, major changes, but it likes lists. It likes numbered lists. So the top 5, the top 10, the top 7, those perform better than just a regular page. Anyway, it's fascinating. There's so much there.
It is. There's so much, Chris. And when I worked at law firms, I didn't focus on this. When I started my own business and I started working with legal service providers, I learned a ton about it too. And by the way, here's another content idea for everybody. Okay. What are your top performing blogs and client alerts? Why don't you take those? And then that's a separate post. That's a separate social media post, and it's another blog post, right? You could do a post of a roundup. You could do that if you write a lot, that could be a quarterly post. Many of you are doing what I call one and done. And so you post something once and it never sees the light of day again. That's not strategic content marketing. Okay. So for content marketing and social media to work effectively, you've got to work with your MarTech folks. You've got to work with the website folks. You've got to work in tandem with each other, business development. You're all working together. And motivation of the lawyers to write more, yes, that's half of the battle, but you've got things already. You've got a groundswell of content you can use. And so get your money's worth from the stuff. And like I said, turn those videos into blog posts, break up those webinars that are dreadfully boring. And you can even turn, by the way, a video into an audiogram, into a podcast. Like, you don't have to start a podcast actually. So there's an endless amount of ideas. Okay. And then I mentioned this earlier. I want everybody to think human to human versus anything else, even when you're writing law firm content. Okay. So human focused content marketing, leaning into relatability, empathy, telling stories, get your lawyers to start telling stories. Yes, you can do this even on a LinkedIn company page. Okay. If you feature your employees more, we've got lots of heritage months coming up. We have Black History Month, Women's History Month. There's so many others. What about featuring a new lateral and doing a Q&A with that lateral? Why did they join your firm, etc.? Maybe somebody, a partner who's been there 20 years, and ask that elder statesperson for their advice. And, think about, or maybe it's a partner talking about a big deal that just closed and interviewing maybe the client if they're willing to do it, or just having them talk about it, or an associate who worked on it. Finding ways to toot your own horn, but injecting people and telling stories and building connections is what's going to separate people. There's a firm out there, the woman who represented Johnny Depp. Everybody knows that firm now, right? We know her because she was more of a human than a firm, right? People. So your goal is going to be to try and focus on the people versus the firm. Okay.
And here's one, toot your own horn very humbly, but also, I guess toot the client's horn, right?
Yeah.
Invite them to be on your podcasts, in your videos, in your webinars or training classes, and focus on them and highlight them. Teaching your lawyers to make it really all about the client. It just makes it so much easier, so much more authentic. People love it. They love to talk about, they don't want to talk about themselves, but they love it when other
people are flattered.
They are.
If you can start a CEO series that is sponsored by your firm and interview like top CEOs or general counsel, hi, great idea, right? Okay. This is just a look at like a content marketing circle, just to think about a lot of the things that you should be concerned with. SEO must be front and center today. Okay. So I won't get into a ton more on that, but I just want you to keep that top of mind. I love this example because I'm Italian and I love pasta, but I really want everyone to have a content marketing strategy. One of the things that is so hard is that we get thrown content all the time by lawyers, like publish this immigration client alert, publish this alert, send out this invitation. And you're sort of like, well, wait, what? Like you're like, it's like you're playing volleyball or you're like playing defense. And you have all these other ideas of these things on your content calendar, which is another tip. Every firm, every person needs a content calendar so you can see what you've done and plan ahead. Now, we will still be throwing spaghetti at the wall because we work at law firms and we are expected to, send things out when the lawyers want us to send things out. We also have to intersperse things that are strategic. Okay. So that's what I want you to do, and think about some of the owned media pieces you have. So some of those evergreen pieces, maybe a Q&A with a lawyer, like I said, maybe a look at certain practice groups that are strategic. But one word of advice, if you have a practice group that is posting a ton of content that is not one of your marquee practices, or a practice that you really don't feel like it should be you should be shining a light on. So I'll give you an example. I worked for a white shoe firm that had a very tiny immigration practice, but they were prolific in publishing alerts. Now that was great, but my social media feed was becoming immigration alert after immigration alert after immigration alert, which was not what the firm wanted its brand to be, or what the firm wanted its clients to see. So we did a compilation of those immigration alerts, just one post per week. This was when a lot of the Trump stuff was happening with changes in immigration law. So instead of posting them individually, I posted them once per week, and then I had other content. Okay. So that is a good way to get around having to meet the demands of the lawyers, throwing that spaghetti at the wall, but also having a strategic plan. If you don't have a strategic content marketing strategy, you're not where you should be today. Now, we know law firms lag behind, but I don't want you guys to lag behind this year. So think about these things. Stop creating content that really nobody consumes. You know how you influence lawyers? Look at the data. Data doesn't lie. Look at your Google Analytics, look at your email marketing statistics, look at your social media statistics, okay? Every time you send out an email, every single time you post an alert, every social media post, you should be doing an analytics report that is digestible and not overwhelming, because lawyers don't like that. They don't have the time, like Chris said, right? They're busy. Give them the most important facts. This is how many people opened it, but give them the industry average and tell them this is really good, actually. Because, if they hear 30%, they think, oh my God, 70% didn't open it, right? They need to see the good, okay? This alert did really well. And then quarterly, show your wins. Show that, this many alerts got opened and this one did really well, so we should write another one. Become a trusted advisor. Personalization. Yeah, go ahead.
And sit down, we'll figure out not just the numbers, but the individuals. Like you did a series, who has attended everyone in the series, and like deep dive and have the business developers sit down with the attorneys and focus on these key individuals who are now really good prospects that maybe it's time to have a little phone call or send them something targeted. Really, and that's where the business development meets the marketing.
Absolutely. Personalization should be something you think about as well. Now, I don't mean like starting off the email like, dear Stephanie, like that. I think is like, you can save that for retail companies. You don't need to do that for law firms. I think personalization is more here about segmentation. So don't blanket everybody with emails that don't pertain to them. They will unsubscribe. Okay. But also there is the idea that if somebody may find an alert or something of interest, that it might not be necessarily in their field. So you can post those on social, but make sure you're segmenting your list and that you're really paying attention to that. And you're amending your list. You're adding lists that, you have a C-suite list. Do you have a general counsel list? Do you have a C-suite list? Do you have it segmented by women? These are those important categories that people will ask you for, and you'll be scrambling to create that. And if you have a database of, 50,000 contacts, good luck to you of trying to create that, off the whim. Okay. And keep track of your data needs through your CRM. So you cannot have a content strategy without CRM. So the two go together, which is why I'm so glad Chris and I partner on these programs, because I really feel like email marketing is so important to content marketing and the success of branding and business development. And you need a CRM to do all of these things. And so that they all just, dovetail together so well. Okay. High quality thought leadership research content. In 2023 and beyond, if you want to differentiate yourself as a firm, as an organization, this is what you should do. Spend the time. This is how you get free news coverage. Who remembers Green Target's annual report that they do on PR and social media news coverage? Okay. There are not many law firms doing anything like this. I feel like there were a few and they've stopped doing it. There was a litigation report and I think that firm merged. So I don't think that they're doing it anymore. If you can be the news source, you will be golden. So maybe it's a report on litigation trends. Maybe it's a report on M&A. Maybe you partner with, maybe you want to partner with ALM. Maybe you want to partner with an accounting firm on this. Maybe you want to partner with a bank. Who knows? The possibilities, again, are endless. You can also pay Bloomberg to do the research for you if you don't feel like you want to have it tabulated and that sort of stuff. There's plenty of outlets that will help you do this. But a white paper, I meant white paper, not right paper, white paper, industry report, a survey, well thought out research, thought leadership will set you apart and give you content forever. Okay, so law firms can do this too. An annual report would be a great thing to do like this, but you got to make it a client-focused annual report. Okay. Considering a podcast. So by the way, there's tons of podcasts. They continue to grow and it is not a coincidence. Podcasts are easily consumable. That's why they're growing. Are there really good law firm podcasts out there? I'm not sure that there are a ton of them. I would love to know some of your favorites. Let me know in the chat or let me know later. But they are an effective way to drive brand awareness and also visibility and also give some love to some of those lawyers that may not be getting press coverage. Remember, all the owned media you do really does help in that respect. So think about value. You want to not sell anything, which lawyers are uncomfortable selling anything anyway. But what kind of guests could you have on? Could you do a general counsel one? Like what's the niche in the market? It's the same question I would ask you if you were trying to start a blog or a video series. Like what is the hole in the market and how could you fill it uniquely?
And one of the firms I worked with, they were so into video and podcast, they wanted to sort of make it an ongoing part of their marketing strategy. They converted a glass-walled conference room into a studio, and they had the little on-air sign. They had the hanging microphones and the video and everything. And so people could go watch the attorneys, do the blog or do the podcast and do the video. And it made other attorneys want to do it. And it was just, sort of a fun part, but it was also, it allowed them the tools they needed to be really professional in doing that.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, by the way, I just thought of a good podcast. It's the Foley and Lardner Diversity Podcast with my friend Alexis, who mentioned the screen recording. Okay, Catherine, you have one. It's called The Legal Lunchroom, combining attorneys and client interviews on education law. I love that title too. Good luck. Let us know how it goes. So there's lots of opportunity, by the way, with podcasts. You know why they're so popular? People listen to them on the go. So working out, driving, when I clean my house, I listen to podcasts. So, you never know. And I'll actually be launching a podcast this year myself. Okay. I want to end with artificial intelligence. Okay. So you should at least be aware that this is happening because this is a MarTech program and it's 2023. So AI can supplement some of your content, okay? It can help you generate some new content. It's not good enough to write your content, and there are definitely some issues online with this, with origination. If you're an IP lawyer, this is a whole new field. In fact, this would be a great area to become an expert in. So let me explain. So look at the top here where this is ChatGPT. If you're not a member yet, I feel like there's a waiting list for it, but try to become a member of it. Try it out. It's so cool. And you type in something. Look what I typed in on the top. Write a presentation on content marketing trends. and you can't see the full extent of what it spit out for me, but it was essentially 8 bullet points. And I used one of them in this presentation.
That's great.
Which was about short form video. Now I edited it, but how cool is that? Now I don't trust what it says in exactly in the way that it says it, but it's really interesting. Now this Forbes reporter said he had asked Chat GPT to write some social media posts, and the results were really awesome. So I can send you guys the article. Google it, check it out. There are others like this. And I mentioned Canva now has an AI part of it. And also I use Captions, the app called Captions, and it also now has an AI plugin for it, and it's really cool. Yeah, Valerie, I think that there is a wait list. I'm on it, but I'm sorry, I already have it. I don't know how I got Chat GPT, but check it out. And that is what I'm talking about, magic text, Rebecca, and it's pretty cool. So
there's an element of AI in those ERM systems as well. And it's great that they can capture those contacts, but they're not going to get it perfect, which is why you still have to, same thing, you have to check behind, do a little data stewarding, but it gives you a good starting point. It's a lot quicker.
Yeah, they're not going to get it perfect. And I agree. Like also, if you ask it a bunch of questions, it's going to give you similar answers, which is why I worry about publishing that as my own content, because somebody else could have the same, very similar answers, right? So it's a starting point. You have to ask it very specific questions. If anyone's interested in learning more about this, I can show you it on my screen, do a separate program about how to use these tools as part of your content strategy. It's a little tricky with law firms, right? Because you don't want to ask it legal advice. So like, I don't know exactly how that works. I've been using it solely for marketing topics, but it's very interesting. You can ask it like how to get over a breakup and it'll give you advice. It's pretty cool. So I'm not going to have time to go into alumni relations today, but I will the next time we do this.
Part 2.
Yeah, we'll send out a part 2. This is how to connect with Chris and I, and hopefully you're already connected to us. And I'll see if there are any.
If you're not familiar with the QR codes, probably you're all in marketing, so you probably are now. But Stephanie actually taught me this, and I thought it was one of the coolest things.
Yeah, this is a tip, but you should always put your LinkedIn QR code, and you can pull that. Yeah. You can pull that from your LinkedIn app. And
but more important, teach your lawyers to do this, because they will think it's the coolest thing and they won't necessarily know about it because they're, not as tech savvy as all of you.
Exactly.
Have them put it in the end of all their presentations.
I'm going to see if there are any questions. Oh, good. I'm so glad you used that tool. Yeah. So it's very easy. So we hope we've given you all some food for thought. You will get a copy of the presentation and the recording, and we will be doing a part 2. If there's anything specific that you want us to get into, let us know. There's always so much to delve into, and I wish we always had more time, but think about all of these tools. Think about what you already have and how you can repurpose, and make 2023 the year you decide to do something a little different, push the envelope when it comes to your lawyers and the things you're doing. So I want to thank everybody for coming, and thank you guys for being a great audience. And
we'll stay on for like 1 or 2 minutes if somebody does have a question, but otherwise we want to be respectful of time.
Thanks, Zachary. Have a great day. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. Thanks, Lori. Take care.
We'll send the slides to you, Lori. All right, great.
All right,
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks, Chris.